Hope you find this very energising and exciting, Robin. And welcome to everybody else who's listening in. Apologies.
Councillor Chaplin.
Okay. 2 minutes, Graham.
There for you to get approval.
Okay.
Chairman.
Approval of minutes, everybody. Robin.
Yeah, just one question, Chairman. We discussed we discussed about the percent. Are we going to have an update on pay at some point? We discussed the Jason gave us an in-depth briefing on how the situation was, what the finances of the authority was.
We're talking about the accuracy of the minutes at the moment.
Ask the question whether there'll be update. I think it's a reasonable question to ask. It's in the minutes.
Yes.
There will be an update on matters arising
Okay.
from.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
No,
Yeah.
Thanks very much. And the accuracy of the minutes. Okay, thank you very much for that.
Agreed, Chairman.
Okay, right, number 3, matters arising.
Chairman, I think Councillor Satchby's already indicated one, but there are probably 2 matters arising. The first is touched upon the thing that Councillor Satchby raised, and Chair, the Chief Officer will be happy to state.
Okay, so following on from the last overview and audit committee, I had to undertake to write a letter to government in terms of the funding for a pay rise, and I think it would be fair to say that I suppose a pay rise for firefighters. Subsequent to that, an offer was made to the Fire Brigade Union of 5% pay rise. The Fire Brigade Union have now gone into a consultative ballot to see, actually, which is sort of an internal thing for the Fire Brigade Union, to see whether members are minded to accept the 5%. And we await the results of that consultative ballot probably within the next week or so. In terms of the actions following the overview and audit committee, I undertook and I did an interview on BBC News where I called upon the government. I explained the position that this authority was in, this service was in terms of actually funding any pay rise, in terms of the ability that we needed either preset flexibility or any pay rise to firefighters to be funded through central government. So I did an interview on BBC News following that. I've also done some informal lobbying through the National Fire Chiefs Council, which I'm a member of, and of that we managed to move the position in that National Fire Chiefs Council. I think actually there was broad agreement to try and lobby the NJC and the LGA to move from the 2% to the 5%. There's been representation to MPs. I've also done an internal vlog in terms of support about the increase in the pay. And also there have been a number of events. We lobbied through the NFCC to engage with the National Joint Council and the LGA on the issue of pay. A number of events were then put in for people to attend, and at them events we said that the pay increase from 2% should be increased. That was the feedback that we get from this authority. Finally, a letter's also been sent yesterday to the new Fire Minister, actually calling on either an increase in central government funding for Buckinghamshire Fire and Rescue Service, or the ability to raise council tax by up to £5 per year.
But it's just a question in terms of any in your field. You won't be able to answer this completely, but obviously she said a 5% increase, that's not unreasonable for the crews, but funding it either by a central government or allowing us to precept, have we had any indication whatsoever that the government's willing to do either of those?
No indication at all about whether they're willing to do them in any way. I think the stop line is there will be a budget, or there'll be an announcement on the budget coming through in terms of November. I think that's what it is. In general terms, I think it'd be fair to say, if you look at Mark, but in general terms, we only really get to find out whether we got preset flexibility probably towards the late end of December.
You're in the same as local councils at the moment.
Yeah, yeah.
Complete. No idea.
Robin,
Yeah, you alluded to the fact that you spoke to the collection of MPs and the most recent minister. Were the MPs talk to the firefighters? They did they say that they would lobby the present Chancellor about the position? When we were talking, there was a previous Chancellor, we had one between, and now we've got a new one. Are they said they're going to lobby him on their constituents, or did they say
Every year I speak to the MPs about funding, and every year all of the MPs undertake to support the fire and rescue service. I will say that they do every year, every single one. I've never had a negative response in terms of that. When in being the chief fire officer now for 7 years, I've never had a negative response in terms of that. They've always lobbied, and they've always been supportive of that. I'm hoping now, like I said, the reason why the letter only went yesterday to the fire minister was because we identified who the fire minister was yesterday.
yeah.
So that's
Well done.
so
You can tell the rest of us who it is, because
I'm interested?
Chris Phil.
Christian, I wish you all the best. Secondly to that, then, so knowing the parliamentary procedures that they are, have we got any indication of whether they MPs have early motion or something to discuss it in the House of Commons rather than if they get to use the House of Commons to actually bring it to the fore?
I'm not aware of any at the moment. I think everybody's waiting for. Well, you'll all, with your other hats on, you'll be aware. And then he makes a good point in terms of local governments. Everybody's waiting on the announcements, the financial announcements in Parliament, and I think from there's probably an opportunity there then to move on and see if.
And you've already said that the local MPs have been fully supportive as different.
I've never, all previous MPs and current MPs, not one of them has ever been negative about the fire and rescue service, and they've always supported them, regardless of political allegiance as well, because we do have other
Thank you.
non-conservative MPs.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Any more on that, Graham?
Another matter arising from the Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
is an action against the Director of Finance and Assets, and I'm sure he's going to provide us on that, and it's connection with sharing this survey of inflationary pressures.
So, yeah, as well as kind of the pay inflationary pressures that we've discussed, there's obviously kind of non-pay inflationary pressures as well, especially around utilities, fuel, etc. So the question was asked at the previous meeting what we're doing about this. So I alluded to an NFCC inflation survey which is being carried out. That has now been all but completed. It's in final draft, just awaiting sign off from the chief officer responsible for it in the NFCC. Once that's signed off, I will circulate it to all members of the committee via email for information. I was also asked the question, what was the inflation rate particular to this service? And in terms of the non-pay inflation pressure we're expecting at the moment, 11.2% for the year. So slightly higher than CPI is running at the moment, and that's just because of the balance that we have on utilities. It's slightly higher than the weighting in CPI. So that's for information on that point. If we were to include a pay award at 5%, that does bring the rate down to 7.2%. Obviously 5% weighted when pay is about 2/3 of our overall cost, drag that inflationary rate down. 7.2% is still a big increase in terms of pressures. And as Jason said, we're making representations around those pressures to local government. Feel up both in terms of pay and non-pay, additional flexibility and or increasing government grants to support those pressures.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, Graham, that's actually,
Unless members have any other questions.
yeah, I'm just looking around, it appears to be none. Okay, thank you much for that. 4, disclosure of interests. Anybody? None at all. Questions, Katie?
None, Chairman.
Number 6, Graham.
Thank you, Chairman. I think all members now will be familiar with this item, and it's under the Regulations of Investigatory Powers Act. It's just to confirm that no officers who undertake in connection with.
Okay. Okay. Right, moving on. 7. Verbal updates.
Ernst & Young are joining us.
I know. Have a look at the screen, everybody. We've got a verbal update.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
By by way of introduction, Andrew Britton, partner at EY, joined on the call by Frank Keats, who's the manager on the audit. I have taken over the audit of the Fire Authority from Neil Harris, who you remember as your previous audit partner. Neil has moved on to another role within the FRC, so I've picked up the audit for the Fire Authority for the 21-22 audit. So we just wanted to take this opportunity to update you on where we are with the external audit and and a couple of issues identified so far, and just explain a little bit about what's still outstanding to be completed. So first of all, I should just say we are well progressed with the audit, and like to record our thanks to Mark and the team for their cooperation and the responsiveness to the queries that we've raised thus far. The issues that we've identified that we will be reporting on when we bring our final results report to the committee. One relates to PPE and the valuation process, not so much the valuation of the PPE itself, but the way that the revaluations are booked through the reserves in the accounts. We've identified an issue which would also impact the prior period, so will require an adjustment in the prior period. Management have provided the workings of that. We need to review and conclude on that particular issue. But you will see an adjustment in the prior period as a result of that. There's also one disclosure impact in relation to the financial instruments note. Again, we expect there to be a prior year adjustment on that, just simply being that the disclosure of some of the things in the notes don't qualify as financial instruments. So both of those we will work through when we complete all of our outstanding work. In terms of outstandings, just so that the committee are aware, we are, as in fact management are, still waiting the final valuer's report on the property valuation, and the valuation that we've seen the draft calculations, but we haven't had the final report, and I know management are chasing for that. We also have some outstanding queries in relation to the valuation calculations with the finance team for responding on. As committee may be aware from previous year's audits, we rely on the work of the auditor of the pension fund, the Buckinghamshire pension fund, for the LGPS element of the pension, the net liability. In order to do that, we ask Grant Thornton, as auditor of the council and the pension scheme, to provide us with an IS 19 letter providing assurance over those. We have yet to receive that. And we will also obviously then expect to complete our work once we've got that letter and that assurance from Grant Thornton. We also have a query outstanding with the council in relation to the calculation of the council tax debtors in the collection fund. We'll await a response from the council on that. Other than that, obviously final amended financial statements and letters of rep in order to allow us to conclude. In terms of the bits that are sat with us, just to acknowledge, as I said, the workings of the prior period adjustments previously flagged, and also clearly once we have the final valuer's report and responses on PPE valuation, we need to work through those. And then completion of our final review of value for money work, going concern conclusions, and then the overall review of our documentation. So hopefully that's helpful in terms of bringing the committee up to speed. If there's any questions, happy to take those now.
Any questions, members? There seem to be a lot of thanks very much gestures here, and thanks so much from everybody here. So thanks so much for your time and efforts.
Not a problem. Much appreciated.
Okay, moving on, number 8, it's page 21. Okay. Is that? Mr. Jones?
Yes,
Mate.
good morning.
morning.
Thank you, Chairman, members. The Compliments, Concerns and Complaints report is brought to the Overview and Audit Committee on an annual basis to ensure and assure our communities within Buckinghamshire and Milton Keynes that Buckinghamshire Fire and Rescue Service treat expressions of dissatisfaction seriously, and that any learning from the investigations undertaken is fed back into the organisation. The report has been reviewed by the lead member for People, Equality and Diversity and Assurance prior to submission to this committee. The papers at pages 21 to 30 of your packs, comprising of a covering report and one appendix, reflect the previous 3 years of data, and you will note that there has been a significant reduction in the numbers of concerns or complaints received over the period 21 to 22 compared with the previous year 20 to 21. Of the 14 complaints received, only 2 were upheld. Both of these can be seen within your packs on page 26. We continue to send out customer satisfaction forms to both domestic and non-domestic users of our service following an incident within their respective property types. You can see from the information on pages 28 to 29 of your packs that the satisfaction rates across the 3-year comparison remain high. The responses to both areas are reported on separately within your packs with a synopsis of some of the qualitative responses received. An independent social research practice, Opinion Research Services, collate the responses and provide an annual report of their findings to the service. The report is presented to our Performance Management Board to aid officers in identifying service improvements. Thank you for your attention, and I will now hand back to the Chairman for any questions or comments that members may have. Thank you.
Thank you for that. That's excellent. Any questions, Emily?
I have a question, Chair, and this is at your discretion. It is tangentially involved, related to this. We've seen the report for the police in terms of looking at their officers and some of their past and experience with domestic abuse and other potentially violent activity. I just wanted some reassurance that we have done that review of our own officers as the police is currently doing, make sure that we can feel confident about telling our residents that that is not the case.
Jason?
This was raised actually at the Fire Authority following the issues raised, the murder of Sarah Everard. And actually Buckinghamshire Fire and Rescue Service as well, in terms of what we do in terms of vetting procedures, in terms of disclosures, criminal COB checks, all of that sort of stuff. We do very, very well compared to other fire and rescue services. That's moved on subsequently. We've been lobbying as a fire and rescue service for what we do in terms of the COB checks, etc., to be rolled out across the country. Following our lobbying, a national board was set up through the National Fire Chiefs Council when we approached the Home Office, and we sit on that board to ensure that actually in terms of our standards are the same standards across every fire and rescue service, and that work is currently ongoing with the National Fire Chiefs Council.
Questions, friends?
Have we gone pandemic, was that any effect on really the priority this year in many respects, and that probably well-being priority? Did that change the way that the data came in the sense that people were very much at home? They use that time at home to occupy themselves with more requests than it was satisfaction, because it did affect, how do I put it, the mental well-being of people in the community. And it just changed the whole matrix of the way you operate when you're under local extreme pressure.
In terms of response, in terms of, I'll look to Suzanne in a second, in terms of whether COVID influenced the number of responses, etc. But in terms of how we manage COVID, in terms of what's interesting for me is that look at complaints about attendance times. There were no complaints, on attendance times this time. We very much during the COVID period we locked down our fire stations and kept them separate from others. I think that's reflected in terms of, so we still provide a very good service during them COVID periods. I'm not sure whether the COVID time had any influence on the numbers of complaints or complaints. I look, Suzanne.
Suzanne?
Thank
Sorry,
you.
please.
No, throughout the COVID era, no, there was no impact on any of the complaints or compliments that we received.
And thank you for that. Just that people behave differently in different situations, and their mental well-being can be damaged.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wonder what nature of complaint do you have?
Question again?
I just. She's still not there.
You're very good at that, understood.
Hello, can you hear me?
Suzanne?
Yes, yeah, you keep fading in and out. Sorry, I missed that question.
Do you want me to ask the question again?
Yes, please.
And I just wonder what nature of concern do you have or complaint do you have?
What type of complaints that we do receive? Mostly, as you can see in your packs, it is around just let me find the document, just bear with me. So it is mostly around miscellaneous, which is sort of like reversing appliances into hedges, damaging walls and things like that. That's the majority of what we've received this year. However, last year it was on staff conduct, and as you can see, it has reduced significantly. I hope that answers your question. I can give you a little bit more fuller examples
fine.
of
Thank you.
of
Thank
the
you very much.
miscellaneous.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Jade?
Thank you very much. I think Officer Connolly has actually alluded to my area of question, which is behavioral conduct. And so training, which I can see is being picked up, looking at the next steps based on the complaints and the compliments. But the question for me too is why? Because if one understands the reason why your staff is doing something, then it is easier to support them. So that would be my area of question is, why do we think we're doing this and what are we doing? Because you can give training, but if you don't understand the reason and the behavior, then you just keep attending the training.
Yes.
Yeah, just on that point, I think with the piece around staff conduct, etc., we investigate every complaint. So thankfully we get very few. So we have the ability to investigate all of those. And if it does relate to any particular behaviours, then we will address those as part of, kind of what's needed for that, whether it's an individual, whether it's a group of people or a team of people. So because we have the ability to investigate every single complaint, we try to get to the root cause of that to understand exactly why those behaviours manifested, and then we can deal with those in the most appropriate way. So we do take them very, very seriously, and as I say, we investigate all of them. As you can see from last year, there was only 2 that were upheld after investigation. So neither of those were around conduct. One was just around smoking in the premises when we were training, and another one was around conduct because we things. But
Behavior.
it's behaviour. So we do it, yeah, absolutely. So so we do investigate them all and then look at how the best way to address that type of behaviour or conduct in the future.
Robin?
Yeah. Say that the context of the paragraph, isn't it? satisfaction out of it. And, I mean, in everything in life, if we managed to achieve that, that satisfaction, what we do would be immensely happy, wouldn't we? So I think that in itself, and I have personalised, I think the matter would be 96% satisfied with what we've done. And I think that's really quite an achievement for staff, and I note that as a badge of honour.
So we're noting that as a compliment.
Yeah.
Would you like me to add that to the register?
Yes.
I think it is, we, I mean, I don't, we're not, in the capacity to award anyone anything. I mean, that needs to be in other places, but I think we should, record our satisfaction. And, the fact that that was a big target.
good point.
hit, You know,
Good
over
point.
and above well question.
Yes. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Okay, Graham, recommendation is for noting. isn't it?
Yeah, Chairman, page 21, let the report be noted.
Thank you for that. Right,
Thank you.
moving on. Yeah, thank you. Moving on, 9A. There's two parts of this, A and B. Lena, welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Nice to see you all in person.
I believe you're on your own today.
I am on my own. My colleague, Alex, who's the senior auditor, supports most of the audit activities, unfortunately, another client. Okay, so just stuck with me, I'm afraid.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you. So the first paper is highlighting the audit activity that we continue to carry out with regard to monitoring the implementation of audit actions that are agreed following the completion of each audit review that we perform. So this paper highlights to members the progress that is being made on implementation of the audit actions. And since the paper was written, I just want to highlight that further progress has actually been made. So there are 5 additional actions that have been closed, and these relate to the resource management audit. As such, the pie chart on page 33 of the paper is actually out of date. So of the 96 audit actions that we are monitoring since 2019-18, there are now 67 actions that have been implemented. And the remaining 22 are past the agreed due date and 5 are in progress within the agreed due date. We do continue to often monitor these with the action owners, and when we do have concerns, we escalate those to Director of Finance and Assets to moving those along, but good progress continues to be made in this space.
Thank you. Any observations, questions? Anybody? Right, Robin.
Just a little enlightenment on page 35. Mentions about continual expression about the council. And it's always good after about money, and money's going to be what the back of it was. So an explanation around that top of the page. Remember, on the explanation around why that's still red.
I'm good. Yes, I've got actions.
That recommendation related from a result of the audit of the Blue Light Hub project. The recommendations coming out of that was, as you noted, the contingency in that project was very small. The recommendation is when we do future projects of that scale, building a bigger contingency to cover risks associated with construction projects. So that will be addressed when we do the updated property strategy early in the new year.
Thanks very much.
Any other questions on that item?
Chairman, recommendation on page 31 that the progress on implementation of recommendations be noted.
Agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Moving on. B, 9B.
So the purpose of this paper is to update members on the progress that we're making on delivering the annual internal audit plan, which is on page 49 of your pack. So we continue again to hold regular meetings with the Director of Finance and Assets to monitor progress and deliver the plan and agreeing timings on which we're going to undertake this review. Since the last meeting, we have progressed with the field work for the HR and payroll process mapping review. This piece of work is currently at the draft reporting stage and will be presented to this committee at the next meeting. We have also completed the field work for the administration audit, and this paper is just going through a quality assurance review and the draft report will be issued shortly. The business continuity and risk management audit, we are planning to commence the field work for this work this month and are currently drafting the scope for the review with management. And then following on from there, we have the inspection and operation improvement plan assurance review. This is currently being scoped and the plan is to undertake this review and complete it this month as well. And then lastly, we have the core financial controls audit, and we've agreed with management to commence a review for this audit this month, with the view of potentially completing it by January. So we're working towards delivering the full audit plan by the end of March and currently are on track to deliver and meet this target.
Robin,
Pension administration, their work, the quality assurance review in progress, which conflict their work completed in progress. Bit like life, isn't it? Still completely in progress. Where are we with that? It's quite key that make sure that pension is adequately up. If I just that's the case, then that's saying that you'll make sure that given the hopes and aspirations, providing something that they're allowed to retire.
Okay, so I will explain how I've noted the state of the audit. So we've completed the field work. This is more the testing that we're doing in terms of the scope that we agreed. So when we finish any field work, we, as myself as the manager, I review the work that's been undertaken. So I'll do the quality assurance review of that work to make sure they have reviewed all the aspects of the agreed scope of the review, and then we issue the draft report. So we have completed the agreed testing. But again, I could come back in the quality assurance process and say, you've missed a spot, can you go back and continue and finish it off? So we are still in that stage where if I'm not satisfied with something, they have to go back and do some more field work. But we are working towards getting the draft report out this month to the service.
Thank you, through the chairman, and can we please have a note with enough funds in there, how it is, how it's working, make sure that there's
we've got Mark going to come in now, I think.
So yeah, the funding of pension schemes is outside the scope of what the internal audit are doing. So internal audit are looking at the administration of the scheme, making sure that people are getting the correct amount when they do it, etc. In terms of the funding, the firefighters pension scheme has a review done every 3 years by the government's actuary department, make sure adequate employee contributions going into the scheme to make it a long-term viable proposition. And for the local government pension scheme, that's done by Barnet Waddingham on behalf of Buckinghamshire Council administer the scheme. We had our provisional valuation meeting actually last Friday, just gone, which shows the scheme is slightly over 100% funding. So on the local government pension scheme, it's performing very well. We're awaiting the results of the latest Actuaries Department for Firefighters scheme. That one is slightly different because it doesn't have assets as such. It's a pay-as-you-go scheme. That's purely on the employer contributions. Hopefully shortly.
Thank you for that. Just that pension has been quite a conversation in the media recently, and whether obviously private pensions and public pensions are completely differently. I don't believe, to correct it, that the vulnerability of the public pension scheme is anywhere from private pensions and fluctuations of the market. Not that I spend all my time looking at the Financial Times, unless I'm eating fish and chips out of it, in which case I'd probably study it quite readily. Am I correct?
Well, because the firefighters scheme is pay as you go, it doesn't invest in assets. That's not exposed in the same way as a private pension scheme possibly would be. The local government pension scheme does invest in a range of assets, equities, bonds, etc. So it is exposed in the weight of market fluctuations. Over the past 3 years, the market has performed very well. So actually the scheme funding is showing a good position at the moment and fluctuate. That's why they do the valuations every 3 years and try and smooth out that effect. So you're not getting big increases and big decreases in employer contributions. It's regularly reviewed, make sure it's going in the right direction, and at the moment.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Rob. Okay. Completed that item. Any other questions, anybody? Thank you very much.
Recommendations, Chairman, on page 47, that members note the progress on the annual report.
Agreed. Okay, moving on to number 10, page 51.
I'm bringing the latest draft procurement strategy and the revised contract standing orders. Just some background on the procurement strategy first. The original strategy we had expired in 2020 and was delayed some time while we waited for the outcome of Brexit, which went on much longer than expecting. We also then had some impact from COVID, but acknowledged that we couldn't wait any longer and needed to come up with a strategy. The strategy is written and aligned to the NFCC procurement strategy. We used a toolkit and assessment toolkit from them to pull together ours. The key points in the strategy are around leadership, commercial practice, and delivering local benefits. We have programs in a review date of 2025 to align with the other safety plan and the corporate plan. And one of the other elements in here that we're focusing on is social value under the delivering of local benefits and sustainability. To add to that, for information, currently our contracts, 58% of our contracts are with SMEs. And the strategy has been brought in with the revision of contract standing orders. We're very keen to make sure that that is maintained and through. And that's why we've linked the two documents. If it's okay, I'll move on to a summary of the standing orders. The standing orders needed to be reviewed on the basis that regulations have changed, and to acknowledge that we are now going to move over to UK procurement rules following the EU rules. We were very keen to look at the thresholds that we had set. We had a minimum threshold of £10,000 to carry out tender processes or processes. Feedback from our key suppliers and our core SME suppliers is that this is onerous. It costs them a great deal of money and time and resources to take part, and we felt that we were starting to lose some of our suppliers because they were turned off by the complexity of processing. So along with the changes to transparency rules and needing to publish contracts and spend of £25,000 and above, we felt it made sense to increase that minimal threshold of 10,000 up to 20,000 and enable the complex processes to kick in at that level and not 10,000. That would also make sure that we were compliant with the new data rule, transparency rules that are coming in. And we were also trying to align with our collaborative partners in the Thames Valley who have thresholds. One of them has a threshold of £25,000 as their starter, and the other authority is looking to align with that. So when we're doing collaborative work, which is about at least 50% of our contracts are collaborative with the Thames Valley, the complications that are caused because we have different internal governance thresholds can make the process take much longer and quite difficult and challenging. If we can get ourselves aligned to the same thresholds, that will definitely improve and make a more efficient process for our collaborative work.
Okay. Looking at Em, you're shaking your head. Emily.
No, I'm not shaking my head.
No, I'm just saying it's a good thing.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that we have now considered social value and impact on the local economy, and I think that's really great. I'm just concerned because there isn't a lot of detail in the papers on those. Is that coming back here, or will there be an opportunity to see that, or?
I think that the social value element, that would become a core part of every tender. That's in every tender process that we do now. We evaluate that as part of the process. Yeah. We've also introduced recently the contract management framework that all to identify that all the future contract management must include monitoring the items such as social value if they are part of the KPIs within those contracts.
So which definition of social value are we using? Which framework of social value are we using to do that? Because there's lots of different ones out there, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think the difficulty is it's not a one size fits all solution.
Well,
So
exactly. That's why I'm asking the questions, because there's not a lot of detail, but there could be, social value could mean
yeah,
this
so-
many different things.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to get to the bottom of.
So because it's a strategy, we try to keep it high level. When it comes to doing the tenders, it'll really depend on what we're tendering for.
Yeah.
So whether it's a cleaning contract, whether it's buying vehicles, they're two very, very different contracts. The opportunities for social value and the areas in which social value can be achieved will be different, whether it's apprenticeships, whether it's through sustainability and use of new kind of fuels in vehicles, etc. So unfortunately, we can't write something that would fit all circumstances that would be probably that thick. So
No,
yeah,
but I
very
guess
much.
what I'm looking for is an understanding that you have a document this thick when you're going out to procurement, because you're writing those things in.
Yes, yeah. So when
Do
we
you see
go,
what I mean?
Yeah,
when we go-
I don't need to see it. I don't need to see
Yeah.
the
Oh, I
20
know.
pages, but what I do want is some confidence that
Yeah.
we are looking right the way through from gender, skills, uh, opportunity for people from untraditional backgrounds coming in for what, ensuring, I mean, obviously, we're already monitoring things like diversity.
It's a very good question. And when you do procurement, what you have to be very clear on with suppliers is how you're going to score them. So we'll set out, we expect this, this and this, you will be scored on this, it'll be weighted to this percentage, etc. So all of that really goes out.
And is that going to vary, or are we going to set a policy? Sorry, this is turning into that. But is that going to be, is there going to be a policy that social value and local economic activity will count for 25% of the score, for example, or?
Sorry, Mike, sorry. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is very much proportionate to the tender, the value of the tender and what goods and services we're buying. But as a standard, we are currently putting in 5% social value.
Right.
Because most of our procurement is seen as very low value compared to larger organisations. However, we use frameworks a great deal, national frameworks, and the suppliers who are awarded onto those, they've already all gone through that process, and that is built into all national frameworks. And social value percentages are higher in them because they are looking at aggregated values. So we are keen to use frameworks where we can on others, because they can make much more of an influence in that level than we can on some of our.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be really nice, request to you, the chair, that we review this approach maybe in a year's time to understand what the impact of that has been and whether 5% was the right weighting to put on it. But let's see how it works.
Well, it's been minuted, and I think it's a good question, actually, so that this will be obviously be coming back to this committee anyway. So, thanks for that. Robin?
Yeah,
And then Ashley.
thank you very much. Thank you for regulations, risk management, the stations and management of it. The simple fact is we shifted from a known matrix of measurement being thing we do a historical similarity measurement, which helped your opinion, which is still an ongoing process. It's not completed. We're still completing lots of legal things, not completed. It's same thing. Has a bit of cost, time and effort to do this, and have we managed to collate values? When I say collate values, the values which were in the previous arrangement are transferable to the agreement, so there's no loss of conditions, no loss of well-being regulations. By respecting the point made about socialism, to be able to go outside. So what I'm really saying, has there been a plus? Negative.
Coming out, the
No,
change
no,
from
not
the new.
coming out. I don't want to
No, no.
I think that as a customer, we
No.
had just
Okay.
enough discussing that subject now. We could do it if we have a large bottle of wine and a.
Right, okay, so
I
think you got the question.
I'm saying, how it'd be beneficial if they're gonna cost us.
Not really. At the moment, we've just continued to work because the EU directives were adopted into UK law anyway, so we continue to follow those thresholds. UK government provided new thresholds to us. They review them every 2 years. That's continued as a normal process, and we still follow and adopt those. So nothing major has changed yet. The procurement bill is going through, I think, it's in the House of Lords at the moment. We expect that now. I think it's set to possibly the end of next year, and that will change some of the processes we're following. The key thing I think that's coming out of that will be much more about transparency and more transparency with suppliers. But I don't think it's going to make a massive change to the processes that we've always followed. It will still be very similar. For the SMEs we work with, they mostly sit below those higher thresholds that we were following. So for us, we do a lot of, we break down a lot of our requirements into small packages so that they go out to attract the smaller businesses and don't hit those thresholds that old EU legislation kicks into and the new UK legislation. There's basic legislation for below threshold around transparency for any spend of 25,000 and above, but the more legislative processes we have to follow, they don't kick in until about 180,000 and above. That's what it was in the EU, and that's just been adopted over, and we're still following that in UK at the moment. So there's no major change in the way we're doing it or any cost to us that's different at this time. I don't think see that massively changing when they finally issue the bill.
After going back to the side about social, you have something else done that. I'm sure we don't. We need to have assurance of what the base levels of what we expect our intentions are, or its aspirations are, and if with local commissioning, it will point how that's going to work. Today.
Looks like Mark's going to give the answer to that.
I was going to say, as we've suggested, Chairman, if we can bring an update in the future of the impact of what we're doing, I think
Which we
that'd
do
be
anyway.
quite a good report on the benefits of
Yeah.
that we've achieved in terms of social value, sustainability through procurement. We'll bring that report to a future committee so you can see that in more detail. If that's forward.
Actually, Lynn and Charlotte.
Just a couple of quick ones. Obviously, in your action plan, you mentioned at the top, the 21 to 22, the critical supplier annual review and formal health check. Just a bit of understanding of what that consists of. I'm presuming that's a financial check on the financial viability of suppliers. And obviously, in this post-COVID world, has the bar gone up, stayed the same, come down? In terms of what we're looking for in financial stability from a supplier. And obviously in the same theme, again, we're probably experiencing the worst supply chain crisis going. And within procurement, how do we handle that from a point of view, if a supplier fails to basically deal on to supply on time, how much leeway do we give them before we go back out and retender again? I suppose is the question I'm asking.
The health check is not just financial, it's across everything. It's across data protection, ED&I, insurances. It covers quite a few other areas that we expect all our suppliers to be able to meet, or they can be an approved supplier, and they're approved on the system, but we need to every year keep checking that and making sure nothing's changed. So it's slightly more than that. We haven't really changed our bar as such of financial stability, but we're monitoring it more. That's what we've changed. We now have real-time live monitoring of all our critical suppliers. We've identified by grading them who are critical, and they're monitored. We also, with the recent things going on more globally, we've also got the NFCC are providing us with many of the fire services have similar key suppliers for core
Yeah.
items. So they're all being monitored, and we receive regular updates on whether they're experiencing any issues or are there any key things we need to know about the supply chain that are going to provide us with any problems. So we've got several places keeping us updated all the time.
Yes, but it's obviously a quick on from that. Is there a redundancy built in if any supplier, any key supplier does have a supply issue?
I think Mark's flagging there.
Yeah.
There are sort of we have a groups of suppliers for
Yeah,
many
okay.
items, I would say. So we're
Okay.
not always dependent on one.
No,
okay.
supplier.
I think a good example of where we've kind of monitored some issues with contracts and mitigated them with the national uniform contract. We're aware of some issues there. What we've done is we've called off our entire year's worth of stock. We've stored it locally to mitigate against future supply impacts. And we are having conversations now with other suppliers more locally. We can source materials from kind of this country or nearer to this country than perhaps where they're manufactured in the Far East, where we had issues with COVID lockdowns, etc. So yeah, we keep a constant check, as Rhonda says, and we need to take action to switch suppliers or call.
Yeah,
I think
okay.
just to add, during COVID, that became very apparent for us, the suppliers, before the current supply chain issue. And we did move much to working with local suppliers, and we got more resilience, we felt, from local suppliers
Yeah,
across than we did from some of the national supply chains.
exactly. There's obviously I've had issues where operations have snowballed because it starts up here and then it filters down to 8 or 10 organisations further down the line who can't obviously fulfil.
Thank you for that. Shadow.
Oh, thank you. I think part of it has been answered. I'm glad that we're sort of having a focus and a good relationship with local suppliers, which is quite good. So that was one of my questions, what our relationship and how good is that relationship with local SMEs? And also with the changes that is been identified here, and you've already alluded to, it's not really a big change, it's just a continuation with a difference in the legislation. Are the contractors being made aware? And what about the people you collaborate with? And you already alluded to some aspects of the changes. How easy is that to do when you're making your changes? The people you're partnering with, collaborating with, are they doing the same? And do you have a time frame to get them to sync with you so that your next steps are easier? But still with that local focus is what it is for me.
Yeah, for the collaboration, that's mostly the 3 Thames Valley Fire Services, and there's a Thames Valley Collaborative Board and procurement arm of that. We meet monthly. We produce joint contracts registers and joint pipelines that go out to the supply chain, so they know what is coming up in the next few years. And we also we share all our documents we use to try and align them as much as we can. We can't align everything because 2 are fire authorities and there's a council, so it's not always possible. We share best practice and, as I say, aligning documents. So where we can see an opportunity to align, we do, which is this is similar and trying, to bring us to the same threshold so that we work together. With the suppliers, the changes come in. Talking about the EU rules to UK rules. I feel that is being communicated by government to suppliers out through their various portals that they use. The transparency that's going to be required going forward is going to should make it much more open for suppliers to be able to see everything that's coming up that we're looking to do in, say, the next 2 or 3 years, as well as what's currently already awarded. So I think that they will know much more by the end of the new coming in suppliers than they ever did before. I think it will be much better for them, and it will be aimed more at SMEs, and they will be involved in procurement in being made aware that procurement's going to start before it starts. I believe that the new procurement rules that come out will be much better, much more transparent for supply.
I think it's captured in there as well. It's quite good.
Thank you very much for that. Very complex matter, isn't it? Any other questions?
Thank you, Chairman. These are actually recommendations up to the full authority, so members will have a chance to consider these again in the December meeting. So the recommendations are follows: that the authority be recommended to approve the procurement strategy 22-26, which is Appendix 1, and the standing orders relating to contracts as amended, which is
Agreed. Everybody agree? Okay, moving on. 11. Stuart.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is the regular report on the status of our corporate risks that we present to every meeting of this committee. The report at pages 85 to 104 of your papers reflects any changes and updates made to the corporate risk register since you last saw it at the 20th of July meeting. Since then, the risk register has been subject to review by officers at our performance monitoring and strategic management boards, most recently at the 18th of October SMB, and also by lead members where individual risks fall within their areas of reference. Appendix 3 contains the detailed evaluations and updates on the status of individual corporate risks. I'll briefly overview these before referring back to the Chairman for any questions or comments that members may have. I'll start by drawing your attention to the risk map at Appendix 1, which is page 89. As you can see from this and also from Appendix 2 at page 91 over leaf, there have been some significant changes since we last reported to you in July. That includes the elevation of the RAG status of one of the risks to red, and we've also drawn up a risk from one of our directorate risk registers onto the corporate risk register. So I'll touch on those a bit later on. Firstly, in relation to the staff availability risk, as Jason mentioned earlier, under matters arising, the FBU are currently consulting their members regarding the employer's revised 5% pay offer. The FBU's Executive Council has recommended that members reject the offer. However, it is important to note that this particular stage only relates to consideration of the offer itself, and so rejection of that would not automatically lead to strike action, which a subsequent ballot will be required. Notwithstanding the outcome of the current consultation, we continue to plan and prepare for any potential industrial action. The current consultative stage closes on Monday the 14th of November, so we will expect the outcome shortly thereafter. Given the timescales required for a subsequent ballot and then subject to the outcome, the notice period to be served on employers, we're probably looking, we're going past Christmas into January, realistically, before any actual industrial action is likely to take place, were FBU members to vote for it. So that's just a brief overview. I'll perhaps just turn to our chief officers and just see if they'd like to add anything to what I've said there.
I think just to pick up on the fact that actually preparing and planning for industrial action, strike action within the service is a huge undertaking, and it feels over that if we look back, we reflect back over the last couple of years, we had COVID, we had this, we had that, we had the other. The focus on the service at the moment is on industrial action planning, going through the plans, exercising them, etc., and monitoring that on a daily basis. That's where we are, and that puts pressure on the service in relation to other things that need doing as well. Or that there's a lot going on there. Coupled with that, we are integral in terms of the local resilience forum, where they're looking at winter pressures, for example, in the health service. So there's a range of things going on in terms of that industrial action sphere, which are not just about the Fire Brigade Union and Fire and Rescue Service. I had a conversation yesterday with the Chief Executive of the South Central Ambulance Service, for example, to see where they are in terms of their planning, should they go on strike, etc. So it's a huge issue within the public sector, and that's something that we're focusing on intensely, but it does have an effect on other work that we should be doing as well.
Good. Thank you. I'll turn now to the financial risk that's detailed at page 95 to 96. You'll see that we've raised the risk score, that one, which has also elevated the RAG status back up from amber to up to red. As set out in the report, this is primarily due to the significant inflationary pressures in relation to things like fuel and energy costs, and Mark touched on those a little earlier on. and also, of course, the likelihood of a higher than budgeted for outcome to the annual staff pay settlement. Just on that, when we set the budget for this last year, back in February, the provision was for a 2% settlement, and obviously every percent increase adds a little over £200,000 to the budget costs. So it's obviously significant. Alongside that, we've also got continuing uncertainty over the future of our central grant funding streams that we receive. So it's quite a challenging outlook, but certain one too. And I think I'll just turn to Mark and just add anything to add to what I've said there at all.
I think probably not this stage here, because I think we covered under matters arising, but obviously you finished your introduction more in terms of.
Yep.
Okay, so I'll now just briefly touch on the remaining risks before handing back to the chairman for any questions that you may have. Regarding information security risk, in addition to ongoing monitoring of the threat environment, we've also seen from the report keeping track of proposed changes to legislation in the form of the Data Protection and Digital Information Bill, which sets out reforms to the UK's post-Brexit data protection regime. This is currently processing through Parliament, but there has been a delay to the second reading, so we're waiting for a new date on that one, but keeping eyes on it. We do have a little bit of positive news on the financial side of things in relation to the McLeod Sergeant pensions risk. And you'll see from the report again that the government has now agreed that they will meet the costs of any awards for injury to feelings, claims and things of that nature, which enables us to release a circa £250,000 provision that we've made to cover that contingency. So that's something, a little bit of upside for us. Regarding COVID, the latest statistical release from the ONS published on the 4th of November indicates that the percentage of people testing positive has decreased in England since this report was prepared. Obviously, we continue to actively monitor the position in relation to this and any associated staff absence trends. The other thing we're keeping a bit of an eye on at the moment is flu, both in its human and indeed bird varieties. And you probably noted from the news now that all domestic poultry now has to be kept indoors, obviously to prevent it sort of spreading in from wild bird population. We haven't had any cases here locally. I think about the nearest has been one picked up in Oundle and also one down somewhere Farringdon Way in Oxfordshire, cropped up, but most of it's on the east coast and in East Anglia. But of course, inevitably it can spread very quickly. The main concern obviously is if it crosses the species barrier. I mean, this one obviously is not transmissible, but if you, for example, get things like swine flu, then that is something that starts to become quite a lot more serious. In relation to the human influenza side of things, obviously we're aware that Australia had quite a bad flu season in obviously over the summer in what's their winter, and so there is obviously the potential for us to receive similar. Just in relation to our own staff, we again offered our free vaccination programme that's now been rolled out, and we had quite a good take up on that. So when we do what we can, obviously, to mitigate the risks to our own staff. And then finally, you'll see that we've also escalated a climate change related risk from our Prevention, Response and Resilience Directorate risk register up into the corporate risk register. That risk is specified and evaluated at pages 103 to 104 of your papers. Essentially, it focuses on the potential for failure on our part to protect our communities from the risks associated with climate change and what steps we are taking to mitigate those. We have given it quite obviously, we're very mindful of what happened over the summer, and we've got the report obviously at the last Fire Authority meeting on that. And so we've given it quite a high initial score there, and obviously will be, as you've seen, a number of sort of follow-up pieces of work that we have underway to respond to all of that. So that is pretty much everything I wanted particularly to draw your attention to. I'll hand back to the chair.
Thank you very much. Questions, Robin?
Yeah, here's a question, Dave. Firstly, can I thank Stuart said about the climate change and how you integrated that into that's the first step on a high rating. I thank you very much for your work done on that. Questions ago, won't slip anyone's mind that the searches are balloting today on afternoon will go whether you act or decide to take whichever view you have on it to take strike action, which shows the pressures of the service which are already out there under a long period of no difficulty taken. compared to inflation. I think our firefighting pay went up, I think, 13% over a decade. Wasn't but why inflation rose through that decade, so it didn't keep pace. So there are those pressures to employees of the fire they're experiencing in their day-to-day bills. So we have to take that into mind when they have their legal ballot and decide what they want to do with the law. And what we have to do is reassure the public. By my experience of talking to firefighters and people that are going on strike, the very last thing they really want to do. It's because of they're public servants. They serve the public. That's why they came into the job. But as a public servant, unfortunately, feeding children, paying your bills does actually come into the equation. There's a limit to what you can personally absorb. So I think we have to make sure our communication around this is based around the legal criteria of their legal rights, of the historical background of why we are where we are. We've stumbled into it over consecutive years. Careful that we put the firefighters after their decision, in the fact that we respect their decision, support them after their decision. They will still be supporting people. This is what people don't understand. They won't be walking away from their responsibilities, rather like nurses won't be walking away from their day-to-day responsibilities. There will be a level of cover which kind of there won't be. Surprised me. That hasn't always been the case, because that makes it even more serious, and doesn't the government should listen. I also presume that there was a level of cover, and I might have even there was. But I do think we have to make sure that we allow them their process and be careful what we say around it, because when a period of industrial action takes place, it does take place, but together afterwards. And we have to understand the background of the earlier, why we are where we are. It's not what this firefight has done, it's the economy, it's decisions in London, and that's what's brought us to this situation.
Okay.
Firstly, so this if strike action does go ahead, and there's no indication yet because there's no strike ballots, but the noises are that there may well be a strike ballot. This would be my third period of dealing with strike in my career. I know there's a lot more than that, actually. So the thing that we've learned over the years, and whenever anybody goes on strike, I accept completely that firefighters do not want to go out on strike, and it'll be a very, very difficult decision. And there are legal mechanisms in place for people to show that that they're not happy with where they are, and we've got to respect them legal mechanisms. But one thing that's always clear about strike action is that people always come back to work. And so from the very start, what we've done in terms of our approach, in terms of the negotiation, the consultation, etc., and it's a national issue, we don't negotiate pay locally, is that we've taken the position that actually what is the longer term damage that we would want to mitigate in the event of strike action. So a number of months ago, we've approached the Fire Brigades Union and we've taken it to our consultative board. And some of the principles that we've laid down in terms of strike provision include, so for example, we must provide a service, must do this, must do that, must do the other. But one of the things that we put in, which is different to most services, is that we must safeguard the longer term relationship between the staff and their employers, and how you treat people, how you speak to people, how you react to people during periods of high anxiety on both sides, because that's what you'll get. You'll get a reduced provision of service within the community from the fire and rescue service because the firefighters are not there, and you will get a higher anxiety from people who are on strike, mainly because they don't want to be on strike. And it's actually how you manage that moving forward. We have regular meetings with the Fire Brigades Union on a regular basis. We will talk, there's a meeting today, there's a meeting at the end of the week as well. We'll probably speak to the Fire Brigades Union and other unions currently, definitely on a weekly basis. And the bit that we want to get through is actually the decision on pay is not negotiated here by anybody here. How do we get through this and come out the other end in a proper manner, which respects people's right to strike, but also respects the position that the authority has to provide a service to the community in the event of an emergency. So I'm hoping I'm trying to allay some fears in terms of that. We have regular communication, but the bit for me is that what we wanted to write into the principles of the planning was about trying to safeguard as much as we possibly can the longer term relationship as we move forward. The fact that people are going on strike is a personal decision, and I respect their decision. It's a legal decision. It's up to them. But the thing about it is we've all got to come back to work afterwards, and we've all got to work together. In terms of the level of service provision, level of service provision has changed over my career. So if you go back to 2004, what happened then was that they brought the armed forces in to ride the Green Goddesses back then. Following that strike, that was taken away, and actually the fire authority must plan for strike action in essence to a certain degree. Should think now what normally happens is there will be normally an agreement that should a major incident occur, then there is the provision to call back people who are on strike. That agreement isn't currently in place. That's a national agreement, but that will be agreed at some point, hopefully. In terms of our local provision, we will be looking for people to work during strike action. Other services have taken the view that actually they will employ people who are not firefighters, and are looking, or retired firefighters, and there are processes going on in other services currently of trying to recruit people to do that should there be strike action. Other services will be using private companies to provide fire and rescue services within the community. And more fire and rescue services, I mean provision of emergency response, and there are contracts currently being signed across other services as we speak. We've not got to that position yet. We've not got to that position, and the reason for that is, in our judgment, there is an offer of 5%. We will have to make a decision about how we provide an emergency response service to the community as we move forward. My feeling is it's not right to do that yet. That will only inflame the situation as we're ongoing. But at some point, and the FBU, to be fair to them, agree, they understand that actually we will at some point have to employ or use some tactics to provide an emergency response should they vote to go out on strike. So every single thing that we do is considered in the context of the 4 principles that we've got, and we can circulate them principles if that's helpful. The 4th principle is about safeguarding the longer term relationship that we have between employer, the fire authority, the fire and rescue service, and employees, regardless of what decision that they take moving forward.
Thank you. Well, when I said, I was referring to what legislation which you answered
It's a very detailed answer, that. Thanks very much.
You know, you gave a detailed answer about you weren't at that stage, you were working to get cooperation in a major emergency. That's where I was coming from. When what I will say to you is I thank you for the proper detailed professional approach that you're taking with this, and that we obviously talk about something which hasn't actually been decided yet. So and it will be in the new year, 23, and that process that we decided there. All I ask is any salient points that we need to know appropriately. This is we have early sight of it because we may get approached
Yes.
for comment on it. And what we need to know is that we're actually commenting on something. We don't know what we're commenting on.
Yes, you will, and that will, if it looks as though there's going to be a battle for strike action and it looks as though there's going to be strike action, the information you receive will accelerate. But what I will say is, there was an exercise this week about industrial action planning. There are things going on in the background currently, but that will accelerate should that risk materialise. I'm hoping that it doesn't, but if it does, we will be providing an update to all members as we did in North Strike. You did.
Emily,
So I was just gonna say, the bigger risk is the multiple emergency services who are all in a similar situation, all happening at the same time. So it's very reassuring or happening consecutively, because let's not forget, it's not like, you know, what, as you know from the trains, you have strike action on one day, it takes a while to get back up and running the next day. It's not full service the next day. So, and I think there is a real risk of that, and I think the government needs to recognize that. And there's certainly been some positive moves on the rail front, the new rail minister, and actually sitting down with the unions and having talks. And I think that's a similar approach that we need to see from across the government and actually recognize, instead of saying, oh, it's nothing to do with us, go. It actually is. So we need to see the government, you know, proactively engaging with the unions and the services to find a resolution through this.
I hope there's a resolution to it. I think that the key point to take from that, and I'm speaking to the Chief Executive of SCAS yesterday afternoon, and I have regular communications. We have the planning through the local resilience forum, but I also have the ongoing dialogue with the Chief Executives of the hospital. They're just phone calls. But I think that the key thing to pick up on this is how interrelated and how interwoven emergency services currently are. So an example would be if firefighters were to go on strike, we currently provide a service to the ambulance service. Should they need to break into a house because somebody is incapacitated, we do them things. During a period of industrial action, we won't be doing them things. There will be a knock-on to other services based upon the things that we provide. A lot of people don't even realise that we do. And I think any resolution needs to consider actually, there's no one service, that everything is so interwoven in terms of emergency response that you need to consider how the effect of one strike, if there is a strike in the ambulance service, for example, would have on us and how, and vice versa, etc. And that's the bit that's really got to be considered, is that broader position.
And the council. I mean, you know, we're only just settling last year's pay claim. We're still discussions and, you know, right, you know, in Bucks and Milton Keynes, we can't predict where that's going to go with unions or the unions in our contract, you know, or the workforce in our further contracts, for example, you know, Serco, the workers at Serco decided to go out on strike in this area, would have a knock-on effect significantly, or Ringway in terms of highways, or your contract and Buckingham, but similarly. So we've been, you know, when I talk about those emergency services, I mean, I am including the council in that. And it is a really difficult time, which is why I'm saying the government need to realise that this isn't a chance to flex their muscles and so they're tough to the unions, but actually recognise these are frontline public sector workers who are providing, you know, a resource, and the public is on their side.
okay, thank you. Very detailed. Thanks so much. Any other questions? You're finished.
Chairman, recommendations on page 85, and 2, that the status of identified corporate risks and CV reviewed and approved. Comments be provided to officers for consideration and attention in future.
Everybody agree?
Agreed, yeah.
Thank you very much. Number 12. Is that Barry?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Right, the purpose of this report and the title is the operation and purpose of the progress made against each improvement detailed within the report. See a detailed version of the of your pipes, and you can also see a sort of version of the itself, which is in ending 2 on page 117 and page 123 of your plan. The operational assurance improvement plan contains a complete record, recommendations and resulting actions that are intended to improve our operational effectiveness in Milton Keynes exercise. The improvement plan is essentially a live document which is updated from many areas of the service. For example, if we go to an exercise, if we go to incidents of any national all recommendations and actions are governed by the operational assurance group before they are accepted onto the improvement plan, and work will continue throughout the next years to make sure that what we deliver as a service gets better and better and better. So thank you for your time. I'll hand back to the chair. I'm happy to take any questions on this.
Correct. Straight away.
Right, it's a general question. I'm just coming from the perspective of the staff and, you know, being involved in EIA and all those things. Like, how involved are your staff in the plan? How widely involved is another one.
Yeah.
So you can get management and middle management. How widely involved?
It's a very good point, actually, because what I'm trying to create a bit of feedback loop. But what we would initially do is we would go to every single instance exercise, or we would send back a feedback form to individuals themselves. But the very first point, asking individuals with the service on what do they think, how they think that the form, because I think we can improve it lots of things. They will come up with different ways. We will pull this into discuss it, and we will once it goes on to me, down to me, it's in my gift, really dictate on the behaviours which we spoke about half an hour ago. Why are we doing certain things? Actually, the nitty-gritty on why are firefighters doing it. We will then take an action to fix that. That might be by a newsletter or exercise, email, or send stuff out to these individuals, and we will be back to them. Therefore, they say we need to, we take it in as a service. Now, then, best thing about this is we will go back to them, tell them, improvement for them. Top of that, not just improvement for everybody else in the county. On watching it, people spend that will help everybody else in the county, and then even a different layer on top of that, the national picture. But then it will be down to us to discuss by this little trend we've seen in Wickham, for example. How can we affect every good and this respect in the country, make it better for everybody?
Very much. Robin?
Thank you. Thank you, Lord. In the report, you areas report about change in the way, and sometimes where you would be in an agricultural area, you could find a water treatment area when you get there. Quite easy to arrive to somewhere in the middle of the field to find that you've gone because climate drought is taking it. The other thing you might not want to do is take it out of some of our rivers, which keep some considerably and spray it. How is but that's a different question, but I just thought I'd get that out there. Some of it irritates me. But no time like the present, right? But how are we going to manage that? And is there any way of knowing when Buckinghamshire is very large, who serves catchment areas of both Buckingham, and having done a couple of river rinses this year and walked in the river through Buckingham, never known it so low. I've never known it. So normally the lads are quite cheered with the fact that I might wade has overflowed. There was no danger about that this year. When we're cleaning the river, I've never known it so low, and that isn't coming back. We haven't had any significant rain, so we go through here from Christmas to spring ready. Water courses aren't there, and ponds haven't asset, so how can we measure that? Have we got some form of, how do I put it, LiDAR that we can sort of look over an area where the team are going to, but when they get there, we know there is water where we know there's water, we know where the springs are, we know where the springs are. The Chess is very low, and the Thames is, clean as it's ever been. But we do need to monitor that, and is there any matrix or way of doing it? Because that's one of the dangers that we have, that
Yeah, it's a really fair point, but it's a big subject. Right? So when we are going out, first it's hard to get water. We need to get talking about daily stuff, which is you have water. Which I want to people buy every day. Trends going, for example, between now and the end of this year, we're looking by winter. We know that it's a problem. I do not a problem. We've got a raft of ways where we can get water to where this would fall into the plan. We could look at, depending on what the plan is, we could look at different example hydrants, hydrant technician where hydrants are. We can send crews out to make sure that the hydrants are working. We would only know at the point where we can't check every single hydrant in the other county. So we have specialist appliances as well. Because we do have specialist appliances in the county that all upon to get the water, and that includes our fire appliances. I could just bring you back to the attention of my extreme weather survey. This was not that I got to me. That was down to myself to collect information I couldn't be doing. That would give us a really detailed look after how we can move issues, which we really could see
That'd be good. Thank you.
When what do planning and forest development one the council what do they are they currently do you need a fire hydrant in the place? Are they're statically doing that? Because if they one of the things is the water there. Developments come in the water there, the resources they're taking water river might be your fire, so it's everybody's after the same thing.
Yes, again, it's good. Yeah, I think there's a couple of elements there, but obviously our protection department will be in close relation with buildings across county to ensure that things like hydrants are put in place in line with legislation and everything else. So a good example of that as well is that I look after the team that manages our management risk information. So, a good example is we've recently gone to a high-rise building where the location of the hydrant, albeit meets the legislative requirements because it's close enough in order to supply the level of fire. The location isn't ideal for us in order to achieve what we need to achieve. So they're actually adapting the layout of the car park in order to, so that close level of engagement across a range of departments in our organisation has led to us being in a much better position to respond to take place there. An example of the OAP as well, just going back to your previous question, I think it's really important, is that obviously the operational assurance team and Barry who oversees that, they own the plan, but there's a number of recommendations that fall into different departments across the organisation, so they coordinate. So we talk around the management for incidents. A prime example of what we're doing at the moment is we're looking at our predetermined attendances for all the risk sites, high-risk sites that we've got across the organisation, and we're looking at one of the prime examples is do we need additional water there as part of the initial attendance if there was a concern at that location. So we're looking at reviewing all of those, bearing in mind that we've experienced in drought conditions, we're experiencing temperatures that we have seen previously, so we're responding quite quickly to make sure that we.
Thank you. I raised it because I've got a development in my area which has got 400 houses and haven't even bothered to range to zero for it yet. It's been trying to prove, well, that's why
Okay.
I raised it, you know, I'm glad that Milton Keynes.
Right, Mick.
But
Mick's got more to say.
Yeah, just on the provision of water for firefighters, just to build on Adam's point, the current guidance written in 1946. So it's currently being reviewed through the National Fire Chiefs Council, and it's almost ready to go. So there will be changes to legislation around provision of water for firefighting purposes. But your point's really well made around future provision of water in general, and that's why we're looking at other technologies as well, where we won't need as much water potentially to put out different types of fires. So there's lots of other technologies on the market now that uses sort of less water in a different way, and we're looking at that around wildfire as well. So it is, as Barry and Adam have both said, it's a very complex situation. But the actual, I say, guidance on provision of water for firefighting, especially in urban areas, that's due to be published this year, I believe. Even though there's not much of this year left, but that was being led through the National Fire Chiefs Council because it was so out of date. But just to give you some assurance, but
Yeah.
local authority do have to, as part of their planning, consult with us on the provision of water and hydrants.
Great, thank you very much. Any other questions? I've got Callum on the screen, or was it Callum?
Yes, Chairman, thank you very much. Just apologies, we are having difficulties remotely hearing and also seeing the video being streamed, but all I would offer up just on those questions, I'm more than happy to meet up with Councillor Statutory separately and expand upon the questions that have been posed and perhaps expand upon the answers as well. That's an open offer to any member of the group, but I just thought I'd say that given the difficulties we're having with hearing some of the questions, Chairman. Apologies and thank you.
That's very good, and you're going to have a one-to-one, Robin.
I pity you.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Robin said. Anyway. Okay, any other questions, anyone?
Perhaps it'd be better if you were a stiff drink.
Yeah, any other questions?
There's no water.
Graham?
Thank you, Chairman. Recommendation is at 105 in the pack, and it's that the progress made against the individual improvement detailed within the new updated operational assurance improvement plan is noted.
Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Right, item 3, it's Adam.
Thank you very much, Chair.
You're on again.
Thank you. The paper has been presented today for noting, and it shows our continual progress against the recommendations are outlined in the report published following that the traffic tragedy which took place on 14 June 2017. This 6-monthly update is the 4th iteration since the work began in service to address the recommendations captured in that phase 1 report. And the report reflects our transparent approach undertaken by each part of the service to action those improvements that are needed in order following the publication. The report, which is Annex A within your pack, provides an overview of activity across response, prevention, protection, operational assurance and training. Following the conclusion of the phase 1 inquiry, there were 46 recommendations that we as a service incorporated into a dedicated improvement plan. The plan is coordinated through the technical team and sponsored by the Head of Protection and Insurance. Of the 46 recommendations to date, we have been able to complete 18 and we've made significant progress in 28 as detailed in point 7.2 of Appendix A. It's really worth noting at this point of the progress that we're being made is that with the 28 that are still in progress, is that 5 of those we are the lead, if you like, the responsibility lies with us in order to implement those, 18 of which fall, the responsibility is the legislative changes that are due to take place early next year and national operational guidance being across the state. In addition to those, 5 of those sit with Thames Valley Fire Control Service, very much around fire survival guidance policy and court processes. A lot of this is really important to stress is that a number of these recommendations are in the assurance at the moment. So actually a lot of the work's been implemented, but we are really keen to ensure that we've got assurance that what we've put in place, the actions that we've taken, are going to make sure that we've addressed those recommendations fully. And out of the 5 that we've got, 2 of those for us are in the assurance process, which I can elaborate a little bit more if required, but 3 relate directly to command support and making sure that communication and technology is improved to ensure that we have that robust communication between control of fire ground in terms of managing risk critical and sharing of information across the incident ground. A dedicated project So those recommendations are going to be captured and addressed within. The inquiry is now concluded. Phase 2, should I say, has concluded with all 18 modules now finished. The panel are in the process of preparing the final report. It is anticipated there will be additional recommendations for the fire and rescue services to review and action once the phase 2 report is published. We are ready to prepare for that. But if you have any questions at all, please do let me know.
Robin,
Just thank you. Astonishing how long it takes for the potential rest. But 8 page. Still understanding that. Announcement and agreement. But I don't have much any laws. Christmas. And so is there a little bit of an explanation around those figures, because those figures they will match going forward?
Yes, they are. So yeah, actually, I've broken down the figures within the section 8, which details the kind of payments that have been made to us as a fire and rescue service authority in order to change. So for argument's sake, where they are as well. So we've had dedicated funding within the technical team in order to research development to introduce additional equipment. There's additional funding that's been as part of the like an uplift grant, if you like, that's been to ensure that the recommendations around legislative changes have been well. I don't know if any point Mark wants to come in.
he wants to come in, yeah.
The breakdown.
Yeah, not to see more detail on the breakdown, just talking general terms around that funding. That really is the kind of the first tranche of funding to meet the initial recommendations coming out with the report. There's further work going on at the moment around the building safety regulator, how the work to address all the high risk premises can be funding. It will initially be through further government grant, eventually be through recharges, so that the developers are picking up inspections, and that's going to be phased in over the next 2 to 3 years. So if there is some initial funding, then there is going to be a longer term solution put in place to ensure all buildings are with basis weather.
Okay. Emily.
And just, first of all, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to the service for the work that they have done, particularly with the council, as there is confusion about whose responsibility it is, and it will be, but hopefully that's all be clarified with all the new legislation coming through. And a huge thank you for the work on Mellish and the Gables in terms of helping some of those issues. That was really appreciated. I think what I wanted to understand, and this is well out of our control, but obviously we're having to respond to it, is because there's been such has the government's plan has meant that actually the implementation of the fire safety upgrades is not actually occurring in many of these tower blocks because of the confusion about who pays. And there seems to be how much additional pressure is that putting on the service in terms of regular inspections, ensuring that you've got additional resources in case there is a fire incident at some of those tower blocks in both Bucks and Milton Keynes.
Callum, you hear us?
I can, yes, I can. I picked up that bit. Thank you, Councillor Darlington. Just to assure members that we are bringing a separate, more detailed report around the specific elements that cut across the fire safety order, the relative protection elements around the outcomes from the Grenfell Tower inquiry. So that'll be coming to the full authority meeting in December, and that'll cover most, if not all, of the questions that have just been raised there. And we'd be more than happy again to meet separately and go through those points outside of this meeting if that satisfies the questions that have been raised, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Any other questions? Around, complete.
Thank you, Chairman. Recommendation on page 127 that the report is noted.
That agreed.
Agreed.
Item 14. to that direction.
Good morning, everyone. So this paper is to prevent an update on the HMIC FRS improvement plan. The service continues to make progress against the action plan, with the following changes as the last period being made, and that's one new item has started and it is on track. Our key focus remains around the two causes of concerns, which relate to prevention and equality, diversity and inclusion. There are a couple of items that have taken place since the last report that I would just like to highlight. So following the Fire Authority on the 12th of October, the prevention strategy was approved and has now been shared across the service. Safety centre funding was also approved, and this will allow us to continue to deliver safety messages to more of our community. We're also presented with the People Strategy Year 2 update that show the progress we have made regarding ED&I. Our prevention improvement plan that feeds the HMIC FRS plan is also being presented today and shows further progress that is being made. We now have good news on our revisit. So following a letter from Matt Parr, which can be found on page 161 of your pack, the revisit has been confirmed to week commencing the 2nd or 3rd of January, given the 2nd is a bank holiday, and will focus on prevention and EDI. The revisit will be over 2 days and is made up of a desktop reviews, interviews and station visits, and they assess how we are progressing against those causes of concern. It is worth noting, though, that the HMIC, if the visit is successful, will only close the cause of concern for prevention. It does not close people cause of concerns in a revisit, but will assess the progress we are taking. We continue to build our portfolio of evidence to support the revisit. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions, Robin?
Thank you. Two comments on your sheets that have been doing you said debate in two areas. Debate with fire and other aid, and then it said making fire and down in the future. They bodied the work which is being undertaken now and being assessed, so they do that not delayed, but they haven't actually discussed. That's what it means.
Yeah, so in terms of the first one, items on facts of this where we your page numbers. So the first one references the bottom of page numbers on it. It relates to the effectiveness. So a review of systems and processes for dealing with referrals. So whilst we have made some minor changes to our referral process in terms of changing some of the scoring that we give to different questions, we are in the process of upgrading our premises risk management system. So once that upgrade is done, and it went live yesterday, so that's really making good progress, we'll then continue to make more developments on it. And we hope to have both this one and the other red one done by the end of the financial year. The other red one off the top of my head, I think relates to strategies, yes. And we are on track to get the strategies updated by the end of the financial year.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Not it's quite impressive how you bring things like that in a report, really. You don't give them like that. Often you read things and you have a way to pick over the red, and the fact that it isn't already. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions?
Thank you, Chairman. Recommendation on page 143 that the committee note the updated HMIC FRS BFRS.
Is that agree? Great. Thank you very much. Item 15. Go on.
Prevention evaluation report. Awareness, the plan has 60 recommendations. Intelligence, management of and delivery. Highlight report being shared with you in July and shows that the stations. The achievements in that include and training has been smoothly, and that's yet to be seen. Move the 3 of the 5 areas which improvement. Rate. This includes coordination of needs, which are still as refined as being so. It's not specifically about worth noting. Work has progressed on prevention strategy, which was mentioned by and that was approved when the September-October highlight its way through to see that the noticing Councillor Buckley's comment about things on hold. There are 2 items that are just because it's been aligned. So the just been start.
Really quick one. Really quick.
Emily?
We talked about, in terms of the part of the prevention strategy, a campaign around space heaters ahead of this winter. I haven't seen it. Could you share that with me so I could, we can make sure that we're advertising that.
Robin?
Yeah, thank you for the comment. Out there. Legal implications section in quite happy and safety gap, child gap. So counter-terrorism next week. What is the interrelation of those things? Many of those responsibility of local authorities, police, whatever. Especially the Homeless Strategy Act. Sometimes it's the fighters who first find when people are homeless and they're actually putting themselves in risk. Is there a interaction when you face something? How would that work? I think the other thing is the mental capacity. Fair to say that most process and mental health is raising certainly very little service. Those things are already cuttings there. Do we move that to the appropriate person? I wouldn't imagine we have the legal capacity to that we encounter them to the many chances that they are very active processes to make sure that they're out with out at night and even the day don't see.
Right.
Response to this. The legislation listed there is to legislation defined. It comes through in strong public. So relationship with statutory to yes, along to those as well. Assurance and we work with the partners to have assurance. Some of the other are actually funds. She's already second. Relationship and work. Mental capacity. Mental capacity. Safeguarding. Means that we're working. And result interaction with me. Sure that's it. It's quite a complex way through this. There's many that try our best. Sure that fun. So this response.
Thank you, Anne. Your response is brilliant there. Thanks very much for that. Great. Any other questions?
Thank you, Chairman. Recommendation on 163 as follows: that the prevention. Oh, no. Yeah, it's the one. Yeah, that the prevention improvement plan highlight report summarising the progress made against the measures required to secure long-term improvements to prevention delivery in Buckinghamshire service be noted.
Agree? 16. Sorry, where are we? There we are. 16. Yeah, 16. Craig. I'm just looking to Craig.
Yes. So I thought today the annual performance monitor is something we bring every year, and it's very similar performance to the last few years, so hopefully I won't be too unfamiliar. It basically shows the outcome of incidents across the service compared with the previous 5-year average. I will start off by saying if there was ever such a thing as a standard year, 21-22 would be the one I would show everybody. We generally were on trend with most things. There were a few things where it looked like we increased from the year before, but that was mostly due to the impact of the pandemic. And so the rises were mostly due to just coming back to being in trend. Normally I would have 3 or 4, maybe 5 points where I'd say, well, actually, you'll probably notice this and I'll give you some answers. There aren't many in there. Everything is close to being on trend as you'd expect. So rather than me spiel of all the different areas, I think I'll probably just open it to questions.
Any questions, anybody? See not?
Very vanilla year.
Yeah, well done, actually.
Next year will be different.
You did a really good job. It's a very important part of this organisation.
Thank you, Chairman. Recommendation on page 171 that the outturn performance against the outcome measures specified in the report. I be noted.
That read? Read. Okay, 17.
Thank you. Today I'll be presenting the Treasury Management Performance Report for financial year 22-23, April to September. The accrued interest earned for the same period is 82k, which is 68k higher than the budget set for the same period. Therefore, the authority has been able to achieve the budget set for the year of 30k. In terms of investment, as at the 31st of September 2022, the Fire Authority had 19.6 million invested in various counterparties, including banks, building societies, money market funds, and current accounts. By March 2023, this was reduced to approximately 15 million to account for our salaries and our pensions that we have to pay over the next few months. As you can see from the investment chart, we have deals maturing on a frequent basis to ensure we can meet our short-term expenditure requirements, as was mentioned. Moving on to borrowing, as mentioned in the July's O&A meeting, we had to repay a maturing deal that equated to 620,000, and this loan deal did not impact our revenue budgets. And just so the committee is aware, the next maturing PWLB loan is March 2024, and it's the value of £1 million. Moving on to the interesting part and what the authority has been able to benefit from in terms of interest rates and the plans for future budgets. The Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee has increased the base rate 3 times since our last meeting, 1.75% in August, then to 2.25% in September, and most recently to 3% in November, which is the highest rate it's been since November 2008, and also the highest single step increase since 1989. The next review date is 15th of December 2022, with our Treasury advisors projecting that this would increase again, and you've probably seen in the news it might even increase at some point to 5% in the coming months. The authority has been able to benefit from these rates when reinvesting surplus funds, and therefore able to gain additional income for the service. The authority has currently 3 times £1 million investments that are greater than 5%, which is very good. So therefore, I can comfortably say that we achieved the budget for the year, and we're projecting to exceed 250,000 by the end of the financial year, probably more closer to 290 based on rates for achievement. In terms of the budget setting for next financial year, 23-24, we've already got a target. I've been pressured from Asif, the head of finance, to try and achieve 270,000, and that's what we're projecting in the MTFP for next financial year. And finally, in terms of cash flow, I will continue to monitor cash flow position on a regular basis to ensure the authority can meet the short-term expense requirements and maintain adequate liquidity. I'm happy to take any questions on this report.
Questions, Robin?
Yeah, the budgetary experiment of the that in itself is really quite a good topic in a global market. Though that may have made a difference to us, our interest rates, we have to be mindful of the fact that that had a negative effect on people working in the cost. Like, understanding it in a purely figures thing in here may look like that looks all right then, because that's gone up. Well, the other thing is everything else has gone up. Experiment clearly failed, didn't it? Bank of England back in, and then had a change of people again. So how do we manage that in the sense that the market is nowhere near a statement coming up, budget coming up, that will have some positive or negative effect, hopefully positive background that we're working for. We are in what by this fluid and moving situation. Rudder, I don't think what norm for that experiment. Who was the norm? Rates are very low, and there was a certain certainty markets, and it's not everyone, probably non-corporate.
Yeah. Okay, systems, how do you manage a change?
Yeah, as you noticed, the Treasury management bit is a very small part of our overall budget. So the positive news on interest rates is we're going to get an extra £250,000 roughly next year in terms of interest earned. The negative part, as you say, is putting pressure on upward pay, inflation, all of those kind of things. But that's much more of a budgetary consideration. That's being considered as part of the budgetary process we're going through at the moment. The next week's going to give some indication of where government funding may or may not go. As Jason said earlier, the real detail is going to come towards the end of December. We get the provisional local government finance settlement, and shortly after that, we'll bring the update to members to say this is our budget position, this is what we recommend in terms of funding around council tax, other options around spending, saving, etc. So all of that will come in due course. But yeah, as you noticed, Treasury is just a very small part of the overall issue we're grappling with.
Thank you very much, and we'll all find out where we are.
Yeah, we will do.
When we're told.
Thanks for that, Mark. Any other questions? None, Graham?
Thank you, Chairman. Page 197 for the recommendation, and that's that the Treasury Management Performance 22-23 Quarter 2 report be noted.
Is that great? Right, well, you're in, Joel. Can I just move the local, can I move the forward plan and the next date meeting in front of the next item, please? Can I do that? Thanks very much. Right,
Just to note the forward plan, Chairman.
okay.
Page 209 in your packs.
Is that agreed? Yeah. Thank you very much.
And the date of the next meeting, Chairman?
Yeah, the 15th of March, would you believe? Anyway, not well on that one. Right.
Chairman, sorry. Oh, page 209 in the pack.
209.
Last page.
I look forward after to that. Silly me.
Okay, thanks very much.
Chairman, just to put the recommendation that the press and public be excluded from the meeting by virtue of paragraph 3 of part 1 of the Table of the Government Act, as the appendices contain information relating to financial and business affairs of a person, including those of the authority. On these grounds, it is considered the need to keep information exempt outweighs the public interest in disclosing information.
Much.